By day, I'm the invisible African-American intern at Kim Industries, the girl who gets his coffee, avoids eye contact, and stays out of his way. But by night, under the neon purple lights of the vault, I am someone else. I thought my mask would protect my secret, until the highest bidder stepped into the light. It wasn't just a billionaire. It was him. My ruthless CEO, Kang-Dae, his silver hair shimmering like a blade under the club lights. As he leaned in, his breath hot against my ear, to whisper a price that made my soul tremble, I realized my double life had just become his dangerous obsession. $1 million, his voice rasped, vibrating through the silk of my mask. I don't just want your time, Phoenix. I want to know who is hiding behind that gold filigree. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was sure he could feel it. If he pulled this mask off right now, my life was over. The internship, my visa, the money I was sending home to my mom in Brooklyn, it would all vanish in the time it took for him to blink those cold, dark eyes. But let me back up, because 3 hours ago, I was just Christabel, the girl tripping over her own feet in a cramped office elevator. Move it, intern. You're blocking the sensor, a voice barked. I didn't even have to look up to know it was Secretary Lee. I squeezed into the corner of the elevator, clutching a stack of files to my chest like a shield. I had my hair pulled back into the tightest, most unremarkable bun possible. My glasses were thick, my blazer was 2 sizes too big, and I made sure my mahogany skin was usually shadowed by a bowed head. In Seoul's most prestigious corporate tower, being a black woman was already like having a spotlight on you. I spent every waking hour trying to turn that light off. The elevator doors opened to the penthouse suite. The air shifted. It always got colder on the 50th floor. Kang-Dae was sitting behind a desk that probably cost more than my college tuition. His silver hair was styled in a sharp, professional undercut, contrasting sharply against his pale skin. He didn't look up from his tablet. "The reports, sir," I whispered, stepping toward the desk. "Put them down and leave," he said. His voice was like velvet over gravel. I reached out, but my hand trembled slightly. The corner of the folder hit a silver pen stand, knocking it over. Clatter. The sound felt like a gunshot in the silent room. Kang-Dae finally looked up. His eyes were narrow, piercing, and utterly devoid of warmth. He looked at the fallen pen, then at my hands, and finally, for a fleeting second, at my face. "You're the one who always smells like vanilla and old paper," he noted, his lip curling slightly. "Try to be less clumsy, Christabel. Or be less here. Either works for me." "I'm sorry, Mr. Kong," I muttered, my face heating up. "It won't happen again." "It shouldn't have happened the first time," he snapped, already looking back at his screen. "You're invisible for a reason. Don't make me notice you for the wrong ones." I walked out of that office feeling like I'd been slapped. Invisible. That was the word of the day. "He's a literal icicle," Jennifer whispered, appearing beside me as I reached the lockers. Jennifer was my only friend in the city, a fellow expat with copper curls and a mouth that got her into trouble. She saw the look on my face and groaned. "What did the Silver Devil do now?" "He told me to be less here," I said, slamming my locker shut. "He treats me like I'm a glitch in his perfect Korean software, Jen. I'm tired of being the invisible intern who can't afford her rent." Jennifer leaned in, her eyes dancing with a dangerous light. "Then stop being her. Just for tonight. The vault is having its platinum auction. I've already talked to the manager. One night as a hostess on that stage, and you could make enough in tips to pay off your mom's surgery and move out of that moldy studio apartment." "I can't, Jen. If I get caught." "You won't. That's the point of the masks, Chris. Everyone is someone else in the vault. Besides, that man wouldn't recognize you if you bit him. He doesn't see you. He sees a shadow that brings him coffee." She was right. And that was the most painful part. For hours later, the shadow was gone. Jennifer had spent 3 hours on my transformation. My mahogany skin was buffed with shimmering gold oil until I looked like a bronze statue. My hair, the hair I kept hidden in that tight bun, was now out in its full glory, long, honey blonde box braids that swung past my waist, tipped with gold beads that chimed when I moved. I stepped into the emerald silk dress. It was backless, clinging to my curves, with a slit that climbed up my thigh. When I put on the silk phoenix mask, a masterpiece of black lace and gold wire, I didn't see the intern anymore. I saw a goddess. "Oh my God," Jennifer breathed, holding a hand to her mouth. "Chris, you're going to cause a literal riot." "I just want to make a bank deposit," I said, trying to steady my breathing. The vault was a world away from the sterile white lights of Kim Industries. It was a subterranean palace of neon purples, deep reds, and heavy bass. The scent of expensive oud and sweat filled the air. This was where the 1% of Seoul came to be bad. I stood behind the velvet curtain, my hands shaking. I could hear the announcer's voice booming over the speakers. "And now, for our final offering of the evening. A rare bird from across the ocean. We call her the Phoenix." The curtain swept back. The spotlight was blinding. For a moment, I couldn't see anything but white light and the silhouettes of masked men in the VIP booths. I forced myself to walk to the center of the stage, the gold beads in my blonde braids clicking rhythmically. I'd channeled every bit of the Brooklyn confidence I'd suppressed for months. I didn't walk like a girl who was afraid of a printer jam. I walked like I owned every man in the room. The bidding started fast. 10,000. 30. 50. I scanned the crowd, my heart racing. And then, in the very front row, my soul nearly left my body. There he was, sitting in a plush velvet chair, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He wore a simple black mask, but that silver hair was unmistakable. Kang-Dae. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't looking at the drinks. He was staring at me with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. 100,000, shouted a man to the left, Director Park, a known rival of Kang-Dae's. He looked at me with a greasy, possessive smile that made my skin crawl. Kang-Dae didn't even turn his head toward Park. He just set his glass down. The sound was small, but the room went silent as if he'd fired a gun. $1 million, Kang-Dae said. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a cold, iron command. The room gasped. My knees almost buckled. $1 million for a night of conversation? Kang-Dae, don't be a fool, Park hissed. She is mine for the evening, Kang-Dae interrupted, standing up. He was taller than I'd realized, his presence commanding the entire room. He walked toward the stage, his eyes never leaving mine. He reached the edge and held out a hand, the same hand I'd accidentally brushed this morning. "Come here, Phoenix." I hesitated, then placed my hand in his. A jolt of electricity, hot and undeniable, shot up my arm. He felt it, too. His eyes widened behind the mask, his grip tightening just a fraction. If you're as obsessed with Christabel's secret identity as I am, you need to hit that like button right now. Leave a comment. Do you think Kang-Dae suspects it's her? And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the moment the mask finally falls. He pulled me off the stage with a possessive tug that sent a shiver straight down my spine. The air between us was thick, charged with a tension that felt like a physical weight. I could smell him now, not the sterile scent of the office, but something darker, like sandalwood and expensive gin. My honey blonde braids brushed against his arm as he led me toward the private VIP elevators, and I realized with a jolt of panic that I was no longer in control of this game. "You're trembling, Phoenix," he murmured as the elevator doors slid shut, sealing us in a small, mirrored box. I forced myself to look at our reflection. There I was, glowing in emerald silk and gold, and there he was, the silver-haired devil in a bespoke suit. $1 million is a lot of pressure, Mr. Kang, I replied, my voice a husky version of my own. I had to keep the Brooklyn accent tucked away. I needed to sound like a dream, not a girl from the 50th floor. "Money is nothing," he said, stepping closer. He didn't touch me, but he didn't have to. The heat radiating off his body was enough. He leaned down, his face inches from mine, the black silk of his mask nearly brushing my gold filigree. I didn't buy your time because of the money. I bought it because you're the first thing in the city that doesn't look like it was made in a factory. I let out a shaky laugh. Is that a compliment? Or are you just bored of your perfect world? Maybe both, he rasped. His eyes searched mine, and for a terrifying second, I saw a flicker of recognition. My breath hitched. Does he know? Can he see the intern behind the glitter? The elevator dinked, and we stepped out into a private lounge that overlooked the neon veins of Seoul. It was dim, lit only by the city lights and a few amber lamps. He walked to the bar and poured 2 drinks, his movements fluid and graceful. Tell me, Phoenix, he said, handing me a glass. What brings a woman like you to a place like the Vault? You don't have the eyes of a girl who does this for fun. I took a sip of the liquid. It burned all the way down, giving me a temporary surge of courage. We all have debts, don't we? Some are financial. Some are soul deep. He paused, his glass halfway to his lips. Soul deep. That's a very unsoul thing to say. He walked toward me, and this time, he didn't stop until I was backed against the cool glass of the window. He placed one hand on the glass beside my head, effectively trapping me. You're an American. Is it that obvious? I whispered, my heart hammering. Your rhythm, he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register. The way you carry yourself. You don't bow to the room, you expect the room to bow to you. I like that. It's refreshing. He reached out, his thumb grazing the line of my jaw, just below the edge of the mask. His skin was cool, but the contact felt like fire. I should have pulled away. I should have remembered that tomorrow morning, I'd be handing him coffee while he looked right through me. But here, in the dark, with the city screaming in silence below us, I didn't want to be Christabel the intern. I wanted to be the woman who made the Ice King melt. You're staring, I whispered, my courage rising. I'm trying to solve a puzzle, he replied. There's something familiar about you. Something in the way you breathe when you're nervous. It's like I've heard it before. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. I had to distract him. Maybe you've seen me in your dreams, Mr. Kong. Isn't that what billionaires usually say to girls in masks? A small, genuine smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. It was the first time I'd ever seen him look human. Usually, yes. But I don't dream, Phoenix. I plan. And right now, I'm planning on finding out exactly who you are. He leaned in closer, his nose brushing against mine. The scent of him was intoxicating. My eyes fluttered shut, and for a moment, the world outside this room ceased to exist. I felt his other hand find my waist, pulling me slightly closer until the silk of my dress was crushed against his suit. It was a silent demand, a question that I didn't know how to answer. Are you going to kiss me, or just keep me as a trophy? I challenged the words slipping out before I could stop them. He let out a low, dark chuckle. A trophy stays on a shelf. You're a fire. If I touch you too much, I might get burned. And I have a kingdom to run tomorrow. He pulled back just an inch, his eyes dark with a hunger that made my knees weak. But the night is young. And I still have 6 hours of your time left. We spent the next few hours in a strange, electric dance of words. He told me about the weight of his family's name, the way the silver hair was a brand he was forced to maintain to look the part of the eccentric genius. I told him stories, true stories, but masked in metaphors about growing up in Brooklyn, about the feeling of being a temporary resident in a world that wasn't built for me. You feel invisible, he said suddenly, his voice soft. I froze. That was the word he'd used this morning. Stay invisible. Doesn't everyone? Not you, he said firmly. Never you. Not tonight. As the clock ticked toward 3 a.m., the atmosphere shifted. The playful tension turned into something heavier, more desperate. He led me back toward the elevator, but as we reached the doors, he stopped. He turned me around, pinning me against the wood of the doorframe. I don't want this to end, he confessed. The CEO persona was gone. He looked haunted. I spend my life surrounded by people who want something from me. My name, my money, my signature. But you haven't asked for anything. I was paid for, remember? I reminded him, my voice trembling. $1 million. That was for the club, he hissed, his grip on my arms tightening. This, whatever this is between us, that's not for sale. I want to see you again. Without the mask. Without the neon. I looked at him, my heart breaking. If only you knew. If only you knew that you see me every single day and you don't even know my last name. Some things are better left in the dark, Kang-Dae, I whispered. I reached up, my fingers trembling as I traced the edge of his mask. I wanted to pull it off. I wanted to see the man who was talking to me, not the image. But before I could, the elevator doors opened. We stepped out into the cold morning air of the underground garage. His black sedan was waiting, the engine idling like a purring beast. I'll have my driver take you wherever you want, he said, his voice regaining some of its corporate steel, though his eyes remained soft. But give me something. A way to find you. I looked at the car, then back at him. I couldn't give him my number. I couldn't give him my address. I'll be at the office, I said, a reckless impulse taking over. He frowned. The office? Which one? Yours, I whispered. Before he could process the words, I leaned in. I didn't kiss him, not fully. I just pressed my lips to the corner of his mouth, a soft, fleeting promise that tasted like vanilla and desperation. Then, I turned and ran toward the taxi stand at the end of the block, my emerald dress fluttering behind me like the wings of a bird escaping a cage. I didn't look back, but I could feel his gaze on my spine until the taxi turned the corner. 3 hours later, I was back in my moldy studio apartment. I ripped off the braids, my scalp aching. I washed the gold dust off my skin until the water ran murky in the cracked porcelain sink. I put on my thick glasses, tied my hair into that punishing, tight bun, and donned the oversized beige blazer. I looked at the girl in the mirror. Christabel, the intern, was back. But as I touched the corner of my mouth where I'd kissed him, I knew nothing would ever be the same. I arrived at Kim Industries at 8 a.m. sharp. My head was pounding, and my heart felt like it was made of glass. I sat at my desk, staring at the blank computer screen, waiting for the inevitable. At 8:15 a.m., Secretary Lee came scurrying out of the penthouse office. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Christabel, he's asking for you. No. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead. Is it the reports, Mr. Lee? No, Lee whispered, his eyes wide. He didn't even ask for coffee. He just said, bring me the girl who smells like vanilla. I felt the air leave the room. This was it. The unmasking. The end of my life as I knew it. I walked toward those heavy oak doors, every step feeling like a walk to the gallows. I pushed them open. Kang-Dae was sitting at his desk. He wasn't looking at the window this time. He was staring straight at the door. He still had that silver hair, still had that sharp suit. But his eyes, they were scanning me with terrifying, surgical precision. Close the door, he commanded. I did. The click of the lock sounded like a final judgment. Come here, he said. I walked to the edge of the desk, keeping my head down. You wanted to see me, Mr. Khan? He didn't speak for a long time. The silence stretched between us until I thought I would scream. Then, I heard the sound of a drawer opening. He placed something on the mahogany surface. I looked down. It was a gold bead. One of the beads from my braids. It must have fallen off during our dance in the VIP lounge. I found this in my car, he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. And then I remembered what you said this morning. About being in my office. He stood up, walking around the desk until he was standing right in front of me. He was so close I could smell the sandalwood again. He reached out, his fingers hooking under my chin, forcing me to look up at him. The glasses are a nice touch, Christabel, he whispered, his eyes burning into mine. But you forgot to wash the gold dust off your ears. I froze. My heart stopped. He knew. You. I started, but my voice failed me. $1 million, he murmured, his thumb grazing my lower lip. I think I overpaid for an intern. But for the Phoenix? I think it was a bargain. He leaned in, his breath hot against my face. Now, tell me, Why shouldn't I fire you for lying to my face for 3 months? Because you need me, I whispered, my Brooklyn fire finally flaring up. Because I'm the only person in this building who isn't afraid of you. He stared at me for a heartbeat, and then, to my utter shock, he laughed. A real, deep, soulful laugh. You're right. I do need you. But not as an intern. He stepped back, his expression turning cold again, but the heat in his eyes remained. From now on, you are my private assistant. You go where I go. You eat when I eat. And you will never, ever wear that bun again. And if I refuse? He leaned in, his lips inches from mine. Then I'll tell the immigration office that you've been working an illegal second job at an underground auction house. Your choice, Christabel. Submission or deportation. The air in the office suddenly felt thin, as if the oxygen was being sucked out of the room by his sheer presence. I stared at him, my vision blurring slightly behind the glasses I no longer needed. The submission or deportation threat hung in the air like a poisoned mist. I knew the Korean legal system was strict about visa violations, and a secret job at an underground auction was more than enough to get me barred from the country for life. My family back in Brooklyn was counting on the money I sent home. If I left now, they'd lose everything. You're a monster, I whispered, my voice trembling not with fear, but with a white-hot rage that I had spent months suppressed. Kang-Dae didn't flinch. In fact, a ghost of a smile touched his lips, not a kind one, but the smile of a predator who had finally cornered something worth catching. I'm a businessman, Christabel. And I just made a massive investment. I intend to see a return. He stepped back, returning to his chair as if he hadn't just shattered my world. He picked up a sleek, black fountain pen and began signing documents with a detached efficiency that made me want to scream. Go to your desk. Pack your things. You're moving to the office adjacent to mine. Secretary Lee will show you the non-disclosure agreement. If a single word about last night or this arrangement leaves your mouth, the invisible life you love so much will become a very public legal nightmare. I turned on my heel and walked out, my head spinning. Jennifer was waiting by the water cooler, her face pale. She saw my expression and immediately pulled me into the supply closet. Chris, what happened? Lee says he's acting like a maniac in there, she hissed, her copper hair looking frazzled. He knows, Jen. He found a bead in his car. I leaned my head against the cold metal shelves, the smell of industrial cleaner stinging my nose. He's blackmailing me. I'm his private assistant now. It's a cage, Jen. A high-rise, glass-walled cage. Jennifer's eyes widened. Blackmail? That silver-haired psycho. But wait, did he say what he wants you to do? Is it, weird stuff? He said I will go where he goes. He said I'm never allowed to wear my hair in a bun again. I let out a dry, hysterical laugh. He's obsessed, Jen. But it's not with Christabel. It's with the power he has over me. He wants to own the Phoenix. Then let him try, Jennifer said, her voice dropping into that protective, fierce tone I loved. Listen to me, Chris. If he wants a private assistant, give him the best one he's ever seen. Use that time to find dirt on him. If he has a secret like the vault, he has others. You find his weakness and you turn the tables. You're from Brooklyn, girl. We don't get trapped, we just look for a better exit. I took a breath, straightening my blazer. She was right. I couldn't let him see me crumble. The move to the new office took less than an hour. My new workspace was double the size of my old one, separated from Kang-Dae's office by a single, heavy glass door that could be turned opaque with a button. On my desk sat a thick stack of papers, the silence contract. It wasn't just a non-disclosure agreement. It was a personal contract of submission. It outlined my hours, 24/7 availability, my attire, to be selected by his personal shopper, and a clause that stated I was to accompany him to all after-hours events as his guest. I was reading through the fine print when the glass door buzzed and turned transparent. Kang-Dae was standing on the other side, watching me. He pressed a button on his desk. In here. Now. I walked in, the contract in my hand. I'm not signing this clause about the personal shopper, Mr. Kong. I have my own clothes. He didn't even look up from his monitor. The clothes you have are designed to make you disappear. I didn't pay $1 million for a woman who wants to hide. You will wear what is provided. It starts tonight. Tonight? Director Park is hosting a charity gala. He's been bragging all morning about the Phoenix he almost won last night. He's curious about who outbid him so aggressively. We're going to show him. You want me to go there? As your date? People will recognize me. I felt the panic rising again. They won't recognize the intern, he said, finally looking at me. His eyes traveled from my shoes up to my messy bun, then settled on my face. And they won't recognize the Phoenix without her mask. You will be the mystery executive from the American branch. A new hire. I'm personally mentoring. Mentoring, I spat the word out. Is that what we're calling blackmail now? He stood up and walked toward me, his movements slow and deliberate. I refused to back away this time. He stopped just inches from me, his height casting a shadow over me. He reached out, not to touch my face, but to pull the hair tie from my head. My braids tumbled down, the honey blonde strands catching the light. He watched them fall with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. You have a habit of talking back, Christabel, he whispered, his voice dropping into that dark, rhythmic register. It's a dangerous habit to have with a man who holds your future in his hand. And you have a habit of taking things that don't belong to you, I countered, my breath hitching as his hand lingered near my shoulder. Does it make you feel powerful? Forcing a girl to sit in your office because you're bored. He leaned in, his lips hovering near my ear. I could feel the heat radiating from him, the scent of sandalwood wrapping around me like a velvet shroud. It's not boring. It's a craving. I've lived in a world of ice for 30 years. You're the first thing that's ever made me feel warm. For a second, the mask of the Ruthless CEO slipped. I saw a loneliness in his eyes so profound it made my chest ache. But then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. He straightened his tie and stepped back. The dress will be delivered to your apartment at 6. My driver will pick you up at 7:30. Don't be late. I don't like waiting for things I've already bought. I spent the rest of the day in a blur of spreadsheets and silent stares. Every time I looked up, I could see him through the glass. Sometimes he was on the phone, his face hard as stone. Sometimes he was just sitting there, staring at the gold bead he'd found in his car, rolling it between his thumb and forefinger. When I got home, a box was waiting. Inside was a dress that looked like it was spun from midnight, a deep, shimmering navy blue with a neckline that was both elegant and provocative. Beside it was a note in sharp, slanted handwriting, where the gold beads. I want to hear you coming. The gala was held at a colonial-style mansion on the outskirts of Seoul. The driveway was clogged with luxury cars, and the air was thick with the scent of lilies and ego. When Kang-Dae's black sedan pulled up, the photographers went into a frenzy. He stepped out first, his silver hair glowing under the floodlights. He looked like royalty. He turned and held out his hand for me. I took it, stepping out of the car. I had done my hair exactly like the night before, long, swinging braids with the gold beads chiming softly with every step. I saw the flashbulbs go off and felt the eyes of Seoul's elite on me. I wasn't an intern anymore. I was the threat. Stay close, Kang-Dae whispered, his hand sliding firmly onto the small of my back. His touch was possessive, a silent warning to everyone in the room that I was his territory. We walked into the ballroom, and the sea of people parted. I saw Director Park across the room, a glass of champagne in his hand and a sneer on his face. He saw Kang-Dae, then his eyes moved to me. They widened. He didn't recognize me as the girl from the office, but he recognized the gold beads. He recognized the rhythm Kang-Dae had mentioned. Kang-Dae, Park called out, weaving through the crowd. I see you brought a guest. I didn't know Kim Industries was hiring foreign talent. This is Christabel, Kang-Dae said, his voice cold as liquid nitrogen. My new chief of strategy for the Western markets. She's invaluable. Park's eyes roamed over me, lingering on the curves the navy dress didn't bother to hide. Invaluable? I bet. She looks familiar, actually. Have we met? Perhaps at a private event recently. I felt my heart stop. I felt the sweat start to form at the nape of my neck. Christabel doesn't do private events, Director Kang-Dae said, his grip on my waist tightening until it almost hurt. It was a protective gesture, but also a warning to me to keep my mouth shut. She's far too busy fixing the messes people like you leave behind. The tension between the two men was a physical thing, like a coiled spring. Park's eyes narrowed, flickering between the two of us. He knew something was up. He could smell the secret. I'd love a moment to discuss strategy with her, Park said, stepping closer to me. Man to man, Kang-Dae, you can't keep a woman like this all to yourself. It's bad for business. I don't play by the rules of business when it comes to what's mine, Kang-Dae replied. The night was a minefield. Every conversation felt like an interrogation. I had to play the part of the sophisticated executive while my soul was screaming to run. At one point, Kang-Dae was pulled away by an elderly board member, leaving me alone by the balcony. I stepped out into the cool night air, leaning against the stone railing. My heart was still racing. You're a long way from Brooklyn, aren't you? I spun around. Director Park was standing in the shadows of the balcony, a dark look in his eyes. He wasn't smiling anymore. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, trying to move past him. He blocked my path, his hand catching my arm. The gold beads, the American accent, the way Kang-Dae looks at you like you're his personal salvation. I know who you are, Phoenix. Or should I say, intern number 402. My blood turned to ice. He knew. He'd made the connection. I've been watching the security tapes from the office, Park whispered, leaning in close. It took a while to find you under that blazer and those glasses, but the way you walk, it's unique. Does the board know Kang-Dae is dating the help? Do they know he spent $1 million of company-adjacent funds to buy his own employee at an illegal auction? It wasn't company funds, I hissed, trying to pull away. It doesn't matter, Park smirked. The scandal alone will tank his stock. He'll be out as CEO by Monday. Unless what? Unless you come to work for me. Tell me everything Kang-Dae is planning. Give me the access codes to his private server. Do that, and your little secret stays between us. Refuse, and you'll be on a plane back to New York by morning, and Kang-Dae will be in a prison cell for corporate embezzlement and solicitation. I looked at him, the disgust rising in my throat. I looked back into the ballroom, where I could see Kang-Dae's silver hair through the glass. He was looking for me, his expression frantic, his cool composure finally cracking. I was trapped between two monsters. One who wanted to own me, and one who wanted to use me to destroy the other. Suddenly, the balcony door swung open. Kang-Dae stepped out, his eyes instantly locking onto Park's hand on my arm. Get your hands off her, Kang-Dae said. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, guttural sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Or what? Park challenged. Are you going to bid for her again? I don't think you have enough left in the bank for what she's worth now. Kang-Dae didn't hesitate. He walked forward and punched Park squarely in the jaw. The sound of bone hitting bone echoed in the quiet night. Park crumbled to the ground, clutching his face. She isn't for sale, Kang-Dae growled, standing over him. And if you ever speak her name again, I won't just take your company. I'll take your life. He grabbed my hand, his fingers interlaced with mine, and pulled me back into the ballroom. We didn't stop for the coats. We didn't stop for the goodbyes. We marched through the crowd, past the whispering elites, and straight to the car. The silence in the sedan was deafening. Kang-Dae was breathing hard, his knuckles bloody. I looked at his hands, then at his face. He looked terrified. He knows, I whispered. I know he knows, Kang-Dae said, his voice cracking. He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. I don't care about the board. I don't care about the company. I just care about you. He reached out, his hand trembling as he touched my cheek. Christabel. I didn't mean for it to be like this. I just wanted to keep you near me. I didn't think he'd find out so fast. Why? I asked, a tear finally escaping and rolling down my cheek. Why me? There are 1,000 women in this city who would kill to be in my position. Why was the intern you didn't even notice for 3 months? Because you were the only one who didn't look at me and see a checkbook, he whispered. You looked at me and saw a man. Even if you hated that man, I'd rather have your hate than their fake smiles. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. Don't leave. Please. I'll handle Park. I'll handle the board. Just don't go back to being invisible. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see a billionaire or a blackmailer. I saw a man who was just as trapped as I was. I know the tension is killing you, but I have to ask, is Kang-Dae really protecting Christabel, or is he just tightening the leash? Comment your theories below. And if you want to see how she handles Director Park's blackmail, make sure you're subscribed with that bell turned on. The car sped through the rain-slicked streets of Seoul, the neon signs blurring into streaks of neon pink and electric blue against the window. I sat as far away from Kang-Dae as the leather seat would allow, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The warmth of his forehead against mine only moments ago still lingered, a phantom sensation that made my skin crawl and burn at the same time. He was bleeding for me, literally. I looked at his knuckles, split and raw from the punch he'd leveled at Park. You can't just hit people, Kang-Dae, I whispered, the silence finally becoming too much to bear. This isn't a movie. That was a director of a major firm. There are cameras everywhere. He touched you, Kang-Dae said, his voice flat, devoid of the emotion he'd shown on the balcony. He didn't look at me. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. In my world, you don't negotiate with someone who tries to steal what's yours. You crush them. I am not yours. I snapped, the Brooklyn in my voice sharp and jagged. I am an employee. I am a woman with a life and a family and a name that isn't Phoenix or Intern. You bought a night, Kang-Dae. You didn't buy my soul. He finally turned to look at me. The car passed under a street lamp, and for a split second, the light hit his ash-silver hair, making him look ghostly. Didn't I? You're sitting in my car wearing a dress I paid for, heading back to a life I control. If I let you go, Park destroys you. If I keep you, I protect you. Which cage do you prefer, Christabel? I turned my head away, hot tears pricking my eyes. The worst part wasn't the blackmail. The worst part was that he was right. I was trapped between two men who saw me as a trophy or a tool. When the car pulled up to my apartment building, he didn't let the driver open the door. He got out himself, walking around to my side and pulling the door open. He stood there in the rain, his expensive suit soaking through, looking like a fallen prince. Go upstairs, he commanded. Jennifer is already there. I Hadley pick her up. You aren't safe alone tonight. You Hadley pick her up? Without asking me. I stepped out, my heels splashing in a puddle. You're overstepping, even for a stalker. Park is desperate, Kang-Dae said, ignoring my insult. He reached out, his hand hovering near my arm but not quite touching it. He looked like he wanted to grab me, to pull me back into the car and hide me away in his penthouse. He will try to get to me through you. Or through your friend. Stay inside. I'll have guards at the door. I don't want your guards, I hissed. It wasn't a request, he said, his voice dropping into that CEO tone that brooked no argument. I'll see you at the office at 8. Wear something comfortable. We have a long day of damage control ahead of us. I ran inside, the gold beads in my hair clinking like a funeral march. I burst into my apartment to find Jennifer sitting on my tiny sofa, a glass of wine in her hand and a look of pure terror on her face. Chris. Oh my God, you're alive. She jumped up, spilling half the wine on my rug. Some guy in a suit literally scooped me up from the grocery store and said I had to come here by order of the chairman. I thought I was being kidnapped. You were, basically, I said, kicking off my heels and collapsing into a chair. I told her everything. The gala, the balcony, Director Park's blackmail, and the punch. Jennifer sat in silence for a long time, her auburn curls messy and wild. He's in love with you, she said finally. I choked on my own breath. What? No. He's obsessed with me. There's a difference. Chris, look at the facts, Jennifer said, counting on her fingers. He spent $1 million. He's risking a multi-billion-dollar company. He punched a guy in front of the paparazzi. Men like Kang-Dae don't do that for a glitch in the software. He's gone off the deep end for you. And Director Park? He wants me to be a spy, Jen. He said if I don't give him Kang-Dae's private server codes, he'll have me deported and put Kang-Dae in prison. Jennifer leaned forward, her expression turning sharp. Then we give him what he wants. But we give it to him our way. What do you mean? Kang-Dae thinks he's the only one who can play this game? He's wrong. We're from the city, Chris. We know how to hustle. Jennifer's eyes flashed with a familiar fire. If Park wants codes, we give him a virus disguised as codes. We bait him. We make him think he's winning until he trips over his own ego. But to do that, you have to get closer to Kang-Dae. You need his trust. Real trust. I looked at my hands, still shaking. I don't know if I can do that, Jen. Every time I'm near him, I feel like I'm losing a part of myself. He's so heavy. His presence just takes up all the air. That's because you're fighting him, Jennifer whispered. Stop fighting the current and start steering the boat. If he wants you to be his private assistant, be the best one he's ever seen. Make him so dependent on you that he hands you the keys to the kingdom without you even asking. The next morning, I didn't wear the oversized blazer. I chose a sleek, charcoal gray pencil skirt and a cream silk blouse that hugged my frame in a way that was professional but undeniable. I did my hair in a high, regal ponytail, letting the honey blonde braids fall over my shoulder. I didn't wear glasses. I walked into Kim Industries with my chin up, and for the first time, I didn't look at the floor. The office was in an uproar. Security was everywhere, and the whispers were deafening. I walked past the desks of my former coworkers, feeling their eyes on my back. I wasn't the invisible intern anymore. I was the woman who had caused a riot at a charity gala. I walked into Kang-Dae's office without knocking. He was standing at his window, his silver hair messy as if he'd been running his hands through it all night. He turned, and for a second, he looked surprised. He scanned my outfit, his eyes lingering on my exposed neck. You're early, he said. We have a lot of work to do, I replied, setting my bag down on his mahogany desk. Secretary Lee said the board is calling an emergency meeting for noon. Park has already leaked a blind item to the press about your conduct last night. Kang-Dae walked toward me, his steps heavy. He stopped at the edge of the desk, leaning his weight on his hands. I don't care about the press. I've already had my legal team draft a defamation suit. That's not enough, I said, stepping closer to him. I could see the dark circles under his eyes, the exhaustion he tried so hard to hide. You need to show them that I'm not just a distraction. You need to show them that I'm the reason the Western merger is going to succeed. If I look like a genius, you look like a visionary for hiring me. If I look like a mistress, we both lose. He stared at me, his eyes darkening. A mistress? Is that what you think you are? It's what the world thinks, I said, my voice softening. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I touched the bruised skin of his knuckles. He didn't pull away this time. Instead, he let out a jagged breath. Let me help you, Kang-Dae. Not because you're blackmailing me, but because I'm not going to let a man like Director Park win. He moved so fast I didn't have time to gasp. He grabbed my waist and lifted me onto the desk, pinning me between his arms. The movement was aggressive, desperate, and filled with a longing that made my heart stop. Why? He whispered, his face inches from mine. Why help me after everything I've done to you? Because I breathed, my hands finding his shoulders. Even an Ice King deserves a chance to see the sun. The tension between us was a living thing, a coil of desire and restraint that was ready to snap. He leaned in, his lips brushing against the shell of my ear. If you do this, Christabel, if you step into my world fully, there is no going back. The mask stays off forever. I know, I whispered. We spent the next 4 hours working side by side. I analyzed the Western market data with a ferocity I didn't know I possessed, finding holes in Park's projections that would make him look like an amateur in front of the board. Kang-Dae watched me, his expression unreadable, but every time our hands brushed over a document, the air crackled. By 11:55 a.m., we were ready. "One more thing," Kang-Dae said as we prepared to walk into the boardroom. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. My heart was hammered. "What is that?" He opened it to reveal a brooch, a phoenix made of black diamonds and gold. "You aren't an intern today. You are my chief of strategy. Wear it." He pinned it to my blouse, his fingers grazing my chest. The intimacy of the gesture was overwhelming. For a second, we were just two people in a room, not a CEO and a secret. The boardroom was a sea of gray suits and cold faces. Director Park was there, sitting at the far end of the table with a bandage on his jaw and a triumphant glint in his eyes. "Chairman Kang," Park said, his voice dripping with mock concern. "We were just discussing the colorful events of last night. It seems your mentee has caused quite a stir." Kang-Dae didn't sit down. He stood at the head of the table, his hand resting on the back of my chair. "Christabel isn't here to discuss the gala, Director. She's here to discuss why your department's projections for the New York merger are off by 35%. The room went silent. Park's face went pale. I stood up, opening my laptop. I didn't look at the Park. I looked at the board members, the men who held Kang-Dae's future in their hands. "If you look at the Q3 logistics data," I began, my voice clear and authoritative, "you'll see that Director Park has been hiding a significant deficit in the shipping contracts." For 30 minutes, I tore Park's reputation to shreds with nothing but cold, hard facts. I was brilliant. I was ruthless. I was everything Kang-Dae had seen in me that first night at the auction. When I finished, the board was silent. Even the chairman emeritus, Kang-Dae's grandfather, was looking at me with a newfound respect. "It seems," the chairman said, his voice raspy with age, "that my grandson has a keen eye for talent after all." The Park was fuming. He stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. "This is a setup. She's a plant. She's the reason this company is going to double its value by next year," Kang-Dae interrupted, his voice booming. The meeting was adjourned. "Director Park, stay behind. We need to discuss your resignation." As the board members filed out, I felt a wave of relief so strong I had to lean against the table. We'd done it. We'd won. But as the door closed, Park turned to me, a sickening smile on his face. "You think you're so smart, Christabel? You think he loves you." He pulled a small device from his pocket, a recorder. "I have the audio of him threatening you in the car last night. I have the proof of the auction bid. You might have won the board, but I still have the keys to your cage." Kang-Dae stepped forward, his eyes flashing with a murderous light, but I held up a hand. "Wait," I said, looking at Park. "You want to talk about proof? Let's talk about the offshore account you've been using to funnel money from those shipping deficits you thought I wouldn't find." I pulled a single sheet of paper from my folder. "Jennifer is a very good researcher, Director. And she found your phoenix before I ever stepped on that stage. You've been skimming from the company for years to pay off your gambling debts." Park's face went from pale to ghostly. "The audio you have is a misdemeanor," I whispered, stepping right into his personal space. "The embezzlement I have is 20 years in a federal prison. Give me the recorder, Park. And then walk out of here and never look back." He stared at me, the defeat finally washing over him. He dropped the recorder on the table and practically ran from the room. I stood there, trembling, as the weight of the last 24 hours finally crashed down on me. Kang-Dae walked toward me, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. He reached out, his hands finding my waist, pulling me into the circle of his arms. "You were incredible," he whispered. "I was a shark," I corrected him, leaning my head against his chest. I didn't like the way it felt. "You did what you had to do to survive," he said, his chin resting on top of my head. "Just like I do every day. But you don't have to do it alone anymore." He pulled back, his eyes searching mine. "The blackmail is over, Christabel. The contract is void. You can walk out that door right now and I'll never say a word. You're free. I looked at the door. I looked at the life I could have back. The invisible life. Safety. Then I looked at the man with the ash silver hair who had risked everything for a girl who brought him coffee. I don't think I want to be invisible anymore, I whispered. He didn't wait. He leaned in, his lips finally finding mine in a kiss that was filled with everything we hadn't said, the fear, the hunger, the desperation, and the strange, twisted hope that had grown between us. It wasn't a CEO kissing an intern. It was two souls finally finding a place where they didn't have to hide. But wait, just as Christabel thinks she's finally found her footing, a shadow from Kang-Dae's past is about to step into the light. You won't believe who's waiting for them at the penthouse. The ride up to the penthouse was silent, but the air was heavy with the scent of rain and the metallic tang of the blood on Kang-Dae's knuckles. I looked at him, his silver hair disheveled, and felt a strange pang of guilt. He had dismantled his entire reputation in a single night for a girl he barely knew. When the elevator dinked at the top floor, he stepped out first, his shoulders tense. But as the doors slid open, he froze. Standing in the center of the living room, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows, was a woman. She wasn't an assassin or a corporate spy. She was older, elegant, with hair the color of midnight and eyes that mirrored Kang-Dae's exactly. Mother. Kang-Dae's voice was a whisper, a sound of a broken child. The woman turned. You've made quite a mess, Kang-Dae. Punching directors? Buying interns at auctions? You're becoming exactly like your father. I felt the air leave my lungs. This was the woman who had abandoned him. The shadow he'd been running from his entire life. She looked at me, her gaze sweeping over my honey blonde braids and my mahogany skin with a cold, clinical curiosity. And you must be the million-dollar girl. Christabel, is it? You have your mother's fire. I remember her from the days we spent in New York before the Kims dragged me back into this icebox. You knew my mother? I stepped forward, my heart hammering. I knew everyone who was invisible to the Kims, she replied, a bitter smile touching her lips. I'm not here to stop you, Kang-Dae. I'm here to warn you. My father, your grandfather, is already moving. He doesn't care about your love. He cares about the bloodline. If you stay with her, he will erase you. The confrontation that followed was a storm of old wounds and new fears. Kang-Dae didn't scream. He just stood there, his hands trembling, as his mother laid out the reality of the war we were about to enter. She told us about the chairman's plan to force a marriage, about the visa threats, and about the legacy of silence that had killed her own soul. Go, she whispered to him, touching his cheek with a hand that looked like marble. Before you become like the rest of them. That was the turning point. That was the moment Kang-Dae realized he couldn't keep me in a cage, even a golden one. He spent the rest of the night in his study, and by morning, the man who walked out was different. He looked older, harder, but when he saw me, his eyes softened. He took me back to the office one last time. He wanted to end it where it started. He brought me into that boardroom, the site of my greatest victory against Park, and that's where he finally broke. The kiss in the boardroom felt like the world was ending and beginning at the same time. His lips were cold at first, a reflection of the man he portrayed to the world, but as I pressed into him, they became a wildfire. It was a desperate, messy collision of two people who had spent months pretending they didn't exist to one another. When he finally pulled back, his forehead stayed pressed against mine, his breath ragged. For the first time, the silver devil looked completely undone. You're free, Christabel, he whispered again, his hands still gripping my waist as if he were afraid I'd vanish if he let go. The recorder is destroyed. The park is finished. You can walk out of this building and never look back at this cold, gray tower again. I looked at him, really looked at him. The ash silver hair, the sharp suits, the millions of dollars, it was all just armor. Behind it was a man who was terrified of being alone, yet ready to give up his only source of warmth just to make sure I wasn't burned. I'm not leaving, Kang-Dae, I said, my voice steady. I told you. I'm a partner. And partners don't run when the shadows get long. The next few days were an exercise in restraint. We moved my things back into his penthouse, but this time, it wasn't a prison. It was a war room. Jennifer was there constantly, her copper curls bouncing as she ran through the logistics of the chairman's assets. We knew he was coming for us. We just didn't know how. Living with Kang-Dae as an equal was a different kind of tension. In the office, we were professional, but the moment the elevator doors closed, the air would ignite. We'd stand inches apart, the silence heavy with the things we couldn't say. He'd watch me work at my laptop, his gaze lingering on the curve of my neck or the way my braids caught the light, and I'd find myself losing my train of thought. "You're staring," I'd say, not looking up. "I'm admiring my investment," he'd counter, a playful smirk finally replacing that cold corporate mask. "You have a way of making a spreadsheet look like a work of art. Is that your way of telling me I missed a decimal point?" "No," he'd whisper, leaning over my shoulder, his scent of sandalwood and expensive ink wrapping around me. "It's my way of telling you that I can't focus on anything else when you're in the room." The sensual tension was a constant hum, a wire pulled tight between us. We'd share dinner on the balcony, our fingers occasionally brushing as we reached for a glass, and the electricity would be enough to power the entire city below. We talked about Brooklyn, about the music I missed, about the way he hated the taste of expensive wine, but drank it because it was expected. "You're a terrible billionaire," I laughed one night after he admitted he actually preferred instant ramen to the 5-course meal his chef had prepared. "And you're a terrible intern," he shot back, his eyes dark with a sudden, fierce affection. "You were supposed to be invisible, Christabel. You were supposed to be the girl who brought me coffee and let me be miserable in peace. Instead, you broke my windows and let the sun in. Now I can't see anything else." But the sun was about to be eclipsed. The chairman didn't send an army. He sent a single piece of paper. A wedding invitation. Kang-Dae's name was on it, but the bride wasn't me. It was Lee Hannah, the daughter of the shipping magnate. The merger was back on, and the chairman had signed it on Kang-Dae's behalf, using a power of attorney that had been tucked away in a vault for a decade. "He thinks he can force me," Kang-Dae hissed, pacing the length of the living room. "He thinks he can treat me like a piece of equipment to be traded." "Then let's show him he's wrong," I said, standing up. "We don't play by his rules. We don't hide. We will go to that gala tonight, and we will show them exactly who is running Kim Industries." The gala was the stuff of legends. Every major player in Korea was there. I wore a dress of gold silk that matched the beads in my hair, looking every bit like the phoenix I had become. Kang-Dae walked beside me, his hand firmly on my waist, his silver hair a beacon in the crowd. The whispers were like a swarm of bees. "Is that her? The auction girl? The intern?" We reached the center of the ballroom, where the chairman stood with Hannah. The old man looked at me, his eyes full of a cold, ancient hatred. "You have a lot of nerve coming here, girl." The invitation was for my grandson and his bride. "I am his bride," I said, my voice carrying through the silent room. The chairman laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "A marriage requires a contract. And I hold the only contract that matters." "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "there's another contract you might have missed." "Jennifer." Jennifer stepped out from the crowd, holding a tablet. "Chairman, we've spent the last 48 hours digging through the Kim Industries bylaws. Specifically, the clause regarding unilateral mergers and the ethical standards required for the board of directors. It turns out, forcing an heir into a marriage to cover a debt is a direct violation of the 2024 Corporate Governance Act." Kang-Dae stepped beside me, his presence overwhelming. "I'm not just your heir, grandfather. I'm the majority shareholder as of 4 p.m. this afternoon. I bought out the minority blocks while you were busy planning a wedding." The chairman's face went from pale to a sickly purple. You would bankrupt the family legacy for this?" "The legacy was dead the moment you forgot that people aren't products," Kang-Dae said. He turned to the crowd, his voice booming. "This merger is cancelled. And as for my wedding, you'll all receive invitations in due time." To my marriage with Christabel. The room exploded. Photographers surged forward, the flashes like 1,000 suns. In the chaos, I felt Kang-Dae's hand tighten around mine. We pushed through the crowd, heading for the exit, but as we reached the doors, a familiar voice stopped us. You think you've won? Director Park was standing there, his face still bruised, a frantic look in his eyes. He didn't have a recorder this time. He had a gun. You ruined me, Kang-Dae. You took everything. If I'm going down, I'm taking your phoenix with me. He leveled the barrel at me, his hand shaking. Kang-Dae didn't hesitate. He stepped in front of me, his tall frame a total shield. Do it, Park. But know that the second you pull that trigger, you ensure that every single secret you ever had is released to the police. Lee has the file. It's on a timer. The tension was unbearable. I could see the sweat on Park's brow, the madness in his eyes. Behind us, the elite of Seoul were screaming, diving for cover. Kang-Dae, move, I whispered, my heart in my throat. Never, he replied, his voice a low, steady anchor. For a heartbeat, the entire world stopped. Park's finger tightened on the trigger. I felt Kang-Dae's breath hitch, his body tensing for the impact. The silence in the ballroom was so heavy it felt like it was crushing the air out of my lungs. I could hear the frantic clicking of a single camera in the distance, a sound like a heartbeat, while Director Park's hand shook with a violent, desperate tremor. He wasn't a professional killer. He was a broken man who had lost his kingdom, and that made him 1,000 times more dangerous. He had nothing left to lose but the bullet in the chamber. Move, Kang-Dae. Park screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail. She's the reason. She's the glitch. If she didn't exist, you'd be the perfect heir. I'd still have my seat. She's the one who burned it all down. She didn't burn anything, Park, Kang-Dae said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He didn't move an inch. He stood like a wall of granite between me and the barrel of that gun. I'm the one who lit the match. I'm the one who decided that your corruption was no longer a cost I was willing to pay. If you want to kill the person who ruined you, look at me. Look me in the eye and do it. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I gripped the back of Kang-Dae's silk tuxedo jacket. I wanted to pull him back, to scream, to run, but I knew that any sudden movement would snap the thin thread of Park's sanity. I could feel the heat radiating off Kang-Dae's back, the scent of his sandalwood cologne mixed with the sharp, cold scent of the ballroom's air conditioning. He was ready to die for me. The man who had once told me I was invisible was now making himself the biggest target in the world just to keep me in the light. I'll do it. Park shrieked. I'll kill you both. Suddenly, a loud, sharp crack echoed through the hall. My heart stopped. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the impact, waiting for Kang-Dae to collapse. But the weight in front of me didn't move. I opened my eyes to see Director Park on the ground, his gun skidding across the polished marble floor. Jennifer stood over him, clutching a heavy, crystal award she had snatched from a nearby display table. She was breathing hard, her copper curls wild around her face, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and triumph. Nobody shoots my best friend, she gasped, her voice shaking. And nobody ruins my favorite dress with a crime scene. The security team, finally finding their courage, swarmed over Park, pinning him to the floor. The tension snapped like a rubber band. The guests began to murmur, then shout, as the reality of what had almost happened settled in. Kang-Dae didn't look at Park. He didn't look at the crowd. He turned around and grabbed me by the shoulders, his eyes searching my face with a desperate, frantic intensity. His cool, silver-haired composure was completely gone. He looked like a man who had just crawled out of a wreck. Are you hurt? Christabel, look at me. Are you okay? His voice was a ragged whisper. I'm fine, I breathed, my legs finally giving way. He caught me before I hit the floor, pulling me into his chest. I buried my face in his neck, the gold beads in my hair clinking softly against his collarbone. You idiot. You could have been killed. I told you, he murmured into my hair, his hands shaking as he held me. I don't play by the rules when it comes to what's mine. And you're everything. The aftermath was a whirlwind. The chairman, seeing his world crumble under the weight of the scandal and Park's arrest, retreated into the shadows of his country estate. The merger was dead, but Kim Industries was more alive than ever. Kang-Dae took the helm, not as a puppet, but as a leader who had finally found his own voice. And me? I wasn't an intern anymore. I was the chief of strategy, the woman who had outplayed the Kims at their own game. But more than that, I was the woman who had taught the Ice King how to feel. A month later, we stood on the balcony of the penthouse. The city of Seoul was as bright as ever, but it no longer felt like a cage. I was wearing a simple, elegant white dress, my honey blonde braids styled in an intricate crown. Beside me, Kang-Dae looked out at the horizon, his silver hair catching the moonlight. "You're thinking again," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. "I'm thinking about the auction," he confessed, turning to look at me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, familiar object. The gold filigree mask. "I remember the moment I saw you on that stage. I thought I was buying a distraction. I didn't realize I was buying my own freedom." "You didn't buy me, Kang-Dae," I reminded him, a playful smirk on my lips. "You just paid the entrance fee to the fire. And you're still standing." "I am," he said, his voice dropping into that low, soulful register that still made my heart skip. He took my hand, his fingers interlacing with mine. "And as long as you're by my side, I'll never be invisible again." He leaned in, his lips finding mine in a kiss that was no longer about desperate secrets or corporate wars. It was a promise. A promise of a future where two worlds had finally collided and created something beautiful. We looked out at the city, two outsiders who had built their own empire out of gold dust, silk masks, and a love that refused to be silenced. The night shift identity was gone, replaced by a reality that was far more spectacular than any double life could ever be. I looked at the silver-haired man beside me and smiled. The intern had found her place, and the CEO had found his heart. And as the sun began to rise over the Han River, I knew that our story was just beginning. "Ready for the board meeting?" he asked, a twinkle in his eye. "Only if you promise not to fire me if I disagree with your projections," I joked. He laughed, a sound that filled the morning air with a warmth that no amount of ice could ever touch. "I wouldn't dream of it, Phoenix. I wouldn't dream of it." We walked back into the penthouse, hand in hand, leaving the shadows of the past behind us. The Silver Devil and his Phoenix were ready to take on the world, one strategy at a time. And as the door clicked shut, I knew that in this city of millions, I was finally exactly where I was meant to be. The Brooklyn girl had found her kingdom, and the Ice King had found his son. And together, we were unstoppable. The board meeting didn't start with a gavel. It started with the rhythmic, steady clink-clink-clink of gold beads against the back of an executive chair. I sat at the mahogany table, not tucked away in a corner with a notepad, but seated directly to the right of the chairman's seat. My mahogany skin glowed against the cream silk of my blouse, and I didn't lower my eyes when the senior directors filed in. I watched them. I studied the way their eyes darted to the empty seat at the head of the table, then back to me, the foreigner who had become the center of the Kim Industries storm. "Ms. Christabel," Vice Chairman Han cleared his throat, his voice tight. "We were under the impression that Chairman Kang-Dae would be presiding over the restructuring vote today. His absence is unusual. The chairman is currently finalizing the dissolution of the Park subsidiary," I said, my voice smooth, carrying that Brooklyn edge that I no longer bothered to hide. "He'll be joining us shortly. In the meantime, I'll be walking you through the new ethics compliance framework. I suggest you pay attention. It's no longer a suggestion, it's a requirement for your continued employment." The room was silent. A month ago, these men wouldn't have looked at me. Now, they were terrified of me. I felt a surge of something, not power, but peace. I wasn't playing a character anymore. I wasn't the phoenix of the vault, and I wasn't the ghost intern. I was just Christabel. 20 minutes into the presentation, the heavy doors swung open. Kang-Dae walked in, his silver hair sharp and metallic under the fluorescent lights. He didn't look at the directors. He looked at me. A small, private smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, a smile reserved only for the woman who knew the man behind the ice. "Continue, Miss Christabel," he said, taking his seat. "I find your analysis of our hidden liabilities fascinating." The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, 3 directors had resigned, and the old guard of the Kim Empire had been effectively dismantled. As the room cleared, Kang-Dae stayed in his chair, leaning back, watching me close my laptop. "You're terrifying when you're organized," he murmured, the deep rasp of his voice vibrating through the quiet room. "You're just saying that because I saved you 4% on the logistics overhead," I teased, walking toward him. He stood up, meeting me halfway. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw, his touch light but possessive. "I'm saying that because I still can't believe you're here. After the auction, after Park, after my grandfather, most people would have taken the 10 million and run as far as New York would carry them. I told you once, Kang-Dae. I don't run from a fire. I just learned how to breathe the smoke." I stepped into the circle of his arms, resting my head against his chest. I could hear his heart, steady, strong, and entirely mine. "Besides, who would keep you in line? Secretary Lee is too scared of you, and Jennifer is too busy spending her consultant fee on designer shoes." He laughed, a genuine, warm sound that filled the sterile boardroom. "We're a mess, aren't we? A silver-haired disaster and a girl from Brooklyn who talks back to billionaires. We're a partnership," I corrected him, looking up into his dark eyes. "And we're just getting started." That evening, we didn't go back to the penthouse. We went to a small, hole-in-the-wall chicken and beer place in a corner of Seoul where no one recognized the Ice King. We sat on plastic stools, the smell of frying oil and spices in the air, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was home. Not because of the city, but because of the man sitting across from me, peeling a radish with the same focus he used to sign billion-dollar contracts. "I have something for you," he said, his expression suddenly serious. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn envelope. I opened it. Inside were 2 plane tickets to New York. Business class. Open-ended. "Your family," he said, his voice soft. "I've already arranged for a medical team to meet your mother. The house in Brooklyn, it's been paid off. But I thought, maybe you'd want to tell them in person. And maybe you'd want to show me where you grew up." I felt the tears pricking my eyes. This wasn't a transaction. It wasn't a silence contract. It was a man trying to heal a heart he had once tried to buy. "You're coming with me?" I whispered. "Only if you think Brooklyn can handle a silver-haired CEO who doesn't know how to ride a subway," he smirked, but his eyes were hopeful, almost vulnerable. "They'll eat you alive," I laughed, wiping a tear from my cheek. "But I'll protect you. Consider it a perk of the job." We left 2 days later. Walking through Incheon Airport, hand in hand, we were a spectacle, the tall, striking Korean man and the radiant black woman with gold in her hair. People whispered, phones came out, but for the first time, I didn't care. Let them see. Let them know that the invisible girl had found her voice, and the man of ice had finally found a reason to melt. As the plane climbed over the Pacific, I looked at Kang-Dae, who was already struggling with the concept of a tiny airplane seat despite being in business class. He looked at me and took my hand, his grip firm and warm. "Christabel?" "Yeah, thank you," he whispered, "for not staying invisible." I leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes as the rhythm of the engines lulled me toward a future I never could have imagined. I had gone to Seoul to find a paycheck, and I had ended up finding a kingdom. I had worn a mask to survive, only to realize that the most powerful thing I could ever be was myself. The auction was over. The bid was closed. And the price? It was never about the $1 million. It was about the courage to be seen. I was Christabel. I was the Phoenix. And I was finally, truly home.